Welcome to today's webinar titled Relationship Mapping and Fundraising. This is part 2 of one we did a month or so ago. This is a response to the other webinar where we talked about using a bunch of relationship mapping, social media, finding friends. A lot of people came back and said they just haven't been collecting event data. They don't have this data. So this is a sequel to it, focused on using data that is likely to be on hand and showing how you can get going in a very pragmatic way with right now with not that much investment. So my name is Doug Cogswell. I'm today's presenter. I lead a company called Advisor Solutions. We do a lot of work generally in the business intelligence sector. We do a lot of analysis on data in retail, financial services, and the like, and we have a special focus in advancement and have 130 accounts or so, and have worked on a variety of problems from annual giving to major giving to campaign analytics to field officer dashboards and reports, and we've done quite a bit of work in relationship mapping, and we just want to share some of the wisdom with you today. There's 2 webinars that precede this. This is really a sequel to one we did last March on attachment scores. We talked about what are attachment scores, where do you get them, what do you do with them. We're going to build on some of that in this webinar. If you want to get more detail on how to calculate and where they come from, we encourage you to go back and watch that one. It's recorded up on our website. There was one we did back about a month or so ago on, we're going to use as the base to start from, but we're going to go a different direction and really focus on data that's likely to be on hand in this one. So as follow-on to this, I encourage you to go back and grab these 2 webinars, and we'll have our link at the end of this as well. So the idea behind relationship mapping is to find connections between people, and then engage the people who are most connected to encourage and motivate others. And we've used this in both philanthropic fundraisers and higher ed fundraisers, and it can be really, really powerful way to cultivate prospects, to really build engagement and attachment, and take people who aren't that inclined to give and make them much more likely to give. And we went into more detail in the first webinar on this, but there's 3 types of relationships we see. And one is family. We call that's really strong acquisition power. So there's 2 dimensions to these relationships. How acquisitive are they? I mean, can a contact approach somebody else, and how likely might they be to have that person they approach come in and get interested in your cause? Family has strong acquisition power, but there's not that many. Most people just don't have that many family contacts they can go to, so highly useful, but not as numbers. Friends are strong acquisition power in a much larger number. And then business associates have a lot weaker acquisition power. You're on a board together, it doesn't mean you really know the person, or if you floated an ask or a prospect in front of them, they might respond. Same thing within the same company. And there's moderate numbers of these. The thing we're going to keep coming back to is we see a lot of energy spent on those firms that help you gather these business associates networks, when really it's in your power to help call out and develop data that's about friends, which in the end is much, much more powerful. Last time we talked about that on the outside, trying to build these things over time. This time we're going to work with data you have. I really like this chart. It takes those 3 forms of relationships and lays them in this grid from low to high. High is a lot of them, and acquisition power from low to high. And it really shows that friends, building that network, collecting that data could be a really powerful way to build these networks and connections and use them to cultivate and develop donors. They vary. Higher ed is quite different than philanthropy. Higher ed is much more of a closed community. You want to leverage relationships within that community. There's generally more data, which is what we're going to drill in on today, on hand about events they participated in together as students, fraternities, reunions people have been to together. So inherently this sector is more of a closed community, and there are more existing forms of data. You can additional survey for friends, reunion surveys, and use social media and all that, so you can build this up, but there's a bunch already here. Philanthropy is much more of an open community. There's not this natural connection point. And in our work, what we've done often is really cultivate out ambassadors within the current prospect and donor group and use them to push out. And we've done some great work where create ambassadors in different locations around the country. You have them invite their friends to events, which they're motivated to do. A compelling message, which then does two things. You get to reach out to a new group of people, and then you start building these relationships that you then track in your database. So in the future, you can use the ambassador to go back and cultivate these friends, and you start getting the networks of friends who know each other from the events. It takes some time to build. That's really what we talked about last time, but it can be really powerful in philanthropy. And I guess I was at a case or a client a week ago where we talked a lot about this, and they had been investing and trying to build, these connections of business board relationships, which is hard to get, and when you get it, it's hard to do a lot with. We really encourage them to take this ambassador approach and really start building their own network, start collecting the data, and really using it. It takes a bit at the beginning. There's nothing in the database. You do this over time, it starts building, and within it just takes a year or two, you have this rich database of self-disclosed friendships and networks that you can work with. And again, we just continually find that this top right quadrant is much more powerful because of both the combination of a lot of relationships and higher acquisition power than either family or business relationships. And having this be self-disclosed is the most powerful way we find to get it. And we talked last time about, you can get this friends and committee participation, who invited to an event, surveys of special reunions. There's some stuff you can get from social media, but it's a bit challenging because a lot of our prime prospect bases are not in the age group where they use social media a lot, and they can actually ask the question, what actually is a Facebook friend? How powerful is that? But there's value in this, and this all can be collected. In common interests, event attendance, newsletters, there's a bunch of things you can do to get this. But today we're going to talk from here forward, what if we haven't been collecting this data? What if we've not been tracking who's come to events? We haven't been doing these ambassador programs and tracking who's been invited. Well, first thing we say is start collecting it. I mean, if you start today, within 12 to 18, 24 months, you're going to have a much richer database you can use, and we'll show some great examples of how you can use it. We're also going to show, especially in higher ed, you invariably already have a lot of information that's valuable. And today we're going to look at alums who are in the same class, attend the same events, participate in committees together. We're in the same fraternity or sorority. That builds a lot of bonding, and often those relationships last. We're on the same team or club. So these are all aspects that are in your database that can be used. And one comment on some of the last two, which are student activities. Most of our clients capture that on the advancement side. Some have not been, and some it actually hasn't been even captured on the university student side. But it can be acquired. We've got one client who has students mining through yearbooks to just get this information and get it into the database because it's really important. So this usually exists somewhere. Hopefully it's in a database table that can be loaded right up. If it's not, there are creative ways to get it into the database. And we'd be glad to talk with you or connect you with some folks who are going through those kinds of efforts. So we're going to now take this data and use it, disguised real-life example, to answer 4 questions. So the class of '94 is coming up on its 4th reunion in 2014, next June. Who should our top class agent candidates be for the class of '94? The second question is, once we find them, which prospects should I assign to each of them? And then we've got a couple top prospects. We're going to pick one and see how can we leverage this data to reach that specific top prospect with people that are already highly engaged and committed to our university. And then the last, for this class, we're organizing an event in Florida, and we want to kind of figure out who could be our ambassadors to help fill the event up. So I'm going to launch here some data discovery software. There's happens to be ours. There are other forms of this, but it's going to take the data and put it in a form that's usable. We call this a project. And here we're looking at a first page, and just in this project there's 93,743 entities. There's a mixture of different affiliations and classes and so forth, and there's some text that describes what we're looking at. I'm going to hide that, and there's a set of different pages we'll work through. So I'm working on the class of '94, and I want alums. So You go to this filter and just a bunch of things in it. Let's just click everything off and click the alums back on. So now I've got 56,000 alums. I only want the class of 94. So let's just get the starting point right for our exercise here. I click that. So now I've dropped to the 1,080 who are alums in the class of 94. And for thinking about, who ought to be class agents, I'm going to go to this ratings page where I've taken the 1,080 people, and there's a list of them and how much they've given. There's some, 5-figure donors. There's no 6-figure donors. There's a bunch of, non-donors at the bottom of the list, so forth. They're rated. Looks like of that class, 753 aren't rated. I've got a couple of high rated here. I've got one that's rated 10 to 50 million. That's pretty good. A bunch who are 25 to 50,000. We've also done something called attachment scores. So what we try to do is define who are the people that are most engaged in my university from this class. And there's 3 who we would call owners. That means they've been to all the reunions. They've participated in alumni committees. They've been in student sports. All the things that from a modeling perspective indicate engagement and high propensity to give as well. We've created scores and we've grouped them as owners. There's 3 of them in this class. There's another group of 31 who are highly engaged. That means they've been to most reunions, but haven't quite done as much as the owners. Way on the left, the bulk of my class, 599 or 56% are disconnected. Means they've not been to reunions, they haven't participated in committees, they haven't been giving. Well, I'm looking at class agents for this class. Let's just grab the highly engaged and the owners. I grab them. There's 34 of them. Let's drop down to that group. I can see some of that 34 aren't rated. You want to think about them, whether they should be class agents or not. There's some that are rated. Let's take a look at these attachment scores. So these scores, the owners, the highly engaged, we did some modeling and we have created a score. 1738 is the highest. That's an owner. Then it drops down by the time you get under it. Looks like 1,500, you become highly engaged. You can see what makes it up. This person's been on 4 volunteer committees in the last 10 years. They made gifts in each of the last 5 years. They made gifts in each of the 5 years before that. They've been on 2 student activities as a student. They've been to all 3 reunions they could have been, as is this whole group. They played a sport. As you walk down the list here, this one's highly engaged but a lower score because they've not been on any alumni committees. They've been giving consistently, but they missed one here. 2 student activities, all the reunions, 1 sport. So this is data that most of you have. And for this exercise, trying to figure out, who potentially the best class agents would be, it just creates a score that you can quickly grab what looks to be the 34 best. Let's go to the giving history page for this 34. So we saw there were some that weren't rated. They're colored purple. The hotter colors are the higher rated. Looks like there's a whole bunch of them, and they're rated because there's no purple, that are 5,000 to 10,000 total giving so far, 10 to 20. Let's grab the ones that have also given at least $5,000. Here's 10 of them. And here are their names and how much they've given. And this is maybe a good starting point for my class agents. So I can go back to my first page. We started with everybody, 1,080 in the class. We've got the 10 here that we're most interested in. And let's export this out. I can click here and export this down to my desktop and call it, class agents. This is now going to drop off this dashboard. It's going to be an Excel file down on my desktop that I can now work with. So that was question 1. I'm getting another question. What variables did you use to calculate the attachment score? Yeah, so as you're seeing this, ask questions. We'd be glad to answer them. So again, the attachment scores were calculated off of these kinds of things. There actually is a formula with some more, I think. But this is the kinds of things that volunteer committees, gifts, student activity reunions, sports, alumni event participation. The way we get this, and I encourage you to watch the attachment scores webinar from last winter. It goes into more detail, but we do modeling exercises because the weightings in these vary by school. In some schools, coming to reunions counts more than giving consistently. In other schools, there aren't a lot of reunions, or they're not that powerful, so giving counts more, or volunteer committee participation counts more. And we actually find that some volunteer participation committees are more positive than others. So we do modeling and create a formula off of these kinds of variables that are in the data. And it recalculates every night and creates these scores that we then just bin into these groups. So that's something, if we work with a client, we set up. I would also say this is, you'll see in a minute with one of our candidates, this is can also be an engagement development tool, because if somebody hasn't been coming to reunions, that's going to flag them as not as engaged, and that's something you can then encourage them to start coming, because these are the things that create engagement. And engagement is highly related to more giving. You want to see these factors all be positive in the right direction, and it's something you can cultivate. So anyways, we got our 10 class agents, and now we want to figure out who to assign to them. So the discussion here would be, how do we know who knows who? And we don't have recent friends. We don't have the stuff we talked about in the last webinar, but we do know these people have all been in different student sports and activities. And let's just drop down to this group. So, for example, this group looks like one of them was on the crew team. Somebody played field hockey. They were in fraternities and sororities. This is a group fraternity and sorority. This is a drill down. Let me just drop down to the individual fraternities and sororities. So there's a bunch of them in here. So let's just click the crew. So looks like this person is Pasquale Carnett, was on the crew team, was also in fraternity 34, the LSA Italian Club, presidential scholar, and student workshop. So this is coming off the student activities and sports tables for this person. So if you brainstorm about this a little bit, you could say, well, what if we grab everybody else, because this is one class, that was on the crew team and also in fraternity 34, because we know that the crew team was a small team. They're fairly tightly bonded. The fraternity sororities at this school are tight groups, and people build long-term friendships. Maybe Pasquale should be assigned to the rest of the crew team in fraternity sorority 34. We could go through this with the other potential class agents as well. So I'm going to bring the rest of the class back. And what I'm going to do is, so all the rest of the classes, all these other activities, I want to add in the rest of the crew team. So now I've got 59 people. So there's Pasquale, and there were 58 other people in this class in the crew team. There must have been JV and varsity and different shells and so forth. And then I also want to add in the rest of the fraternity sorority 34. So let's zoom in on this. We're using bars, but these could be lists or whatever. Here's this. So if I click this bar, it adds in the rest of it. So I've got 80 people in this class who were on the crew team and also in fraternity sorority 34. So that's a good start. Let's now go over to the ratings page and see what we've got for this group of 80. Let's drop everybody else out. So I see that of the 80, there's a bunch of them aren't rated. Now, some are rated 500 to 1 million, so I'm getting a feel for this. There's others that are also highly engaged in this group with Pasquale. Let's just say for now we want to remove the unrated, because we're trying to use her, Pasquale, to cultivate in the best people we want to get engagement with. So we'll take the, over here, the unrateds, and there's 42 of them, and just subtract them out. And I've got the 38 people who are in the crew team, on the crew team, and in this fraternity sorority with Pasquale, who are also rated. So let's go back to the first page. And this list is now those 38. This could have other details and contact information. I can now export this list out, and here's my assignment for Pasquale. I probably want to remove if there's other class agents in here, but actually, yeah, there could be, because fraternity sorority 34 could have picked up another one, so we can do one more edit. But that's the idea. This is all information that we have in the database, because we know the student activities. We've been collecting, volunteer assignments. We obviously know the giving frequency for the attachments because it's in the giving table. We know they've been coming to reunions, and so we're able to really use the data to hone in on an approach to get the best class agents and to get assignments for these class agents that make some sense, where there's likely to be connection, relationship that can be built on. So the third question is, let's reach a particular top prospect. So I'm going to bring everybody back We're down to 38 for Pasquale. Let's restore everybody and bring them all back in the class 1,080. So somebody said, Brianna Lenz is a classmate who's we think has been not too engaged, and we want to find the very best people to approach her. This is part of the game in relationship mapping. So I can go to this list. I need to find her. I do a search. I'm going to search on name. I'm going to put Lenz in, L-E-N-Z. So Brianna, it's Brianna. She's given $10,000, lives in Sarasota, Florida. She's staffed. She's rated, 500 to 1 million, so it's a good rating with attachment score. So she's given way below her rated level. Let's look at the ratings page. So I see here that, yep, here's the detached. Let's look at her attachment scores. We're going to go to this page, which breaks down the attachment scores. Why is she detached? Well, she's been on some volunteer committees. She's made 2 gifts in the last 5 years, but only 2. She's made gifts in 2 of the last 5 years, but only 2. Made no gifts before that. 2 student activities, that's good, but no reunions. I think she's getting dinged because she hasn't been to a reunion. That's going to bring her score down. So one thing we see here on getting her cultivated is let's get her more engaged, and with this reunion coming up in June, let's really encourage her to come to her class of 1994, be the 20th reunion in June. So now we want to find out, who could we use to approach her. So we're going to go back to the sports and activity page because this is the data we have where there might be connection. And we see that she also, looks like Brianna was on the crew team. And over here, well, let's just drop this down. Let's look at Brianna. She's in the crew team. She was in Fraternity Sorority 21 and Women's in Science Project. So we need to talk. The crew team's probably got some affinity. Fraternity Sorority, the Women's in Science Project was more of an honor. It actually wasn't a team she participated in. So let's do what we did before. Grab everybody else on the crew team, Fraternity Sorority 21, and sort out, if we can find some people that really used to approach Brianna. So I bring everybody back again. I'm going to add in the rest of the crew team. I'm going to go grab Sorority 21, which is somewhere in here. Again, this could be a list instead of bars if that was what people wanted. Looks like it's up here somewhere. Fraternity Sorority 21, add that back. And so I've got 90 people that are, potentially going to know her from these 2 affinities. Let's go to the ratings page, get rid of everybody else. So we're dropping down to those 90. What I probably want to pick now is people who are more engaged themselves because I want ambassadors of my school to go and approach Brianna. Let's just grab maybe the highly engaged. There's no owners in this group, but at least grab the highly engaged. So grab them with the mouse. There's 6 of them. Let's go to the giving page. Of the 6, there's a couple who are rated because they're green, and they've given 5,000 or more. Let's grab these 2 as a start. So there's 2 people, Deborah and Pasquale comes up again. So she's class agent, and we've got now 2 people who we might want to talk to and say, how well do you know Brianna? We know you were in the fraternity and or the crew team. We can get the details. Let's talk about that and get a strategy going. That's the third thing, using both the combination of the engagement scores and attachment scores, which are coming from the activities, and also these clubs and activities thoughtfully to find relationships. So the last question we had is for the class. We're planning an event in Florida, and we want to find out who should be our ambassadors for this event. So we're going to, there's a pattern here. We're going to go back to the first page, bring everybody back, reselect them all. So I've got the 1,080 back. Let's look at a map and see where they live. So Florida, and again, I'm colored. So the purple are unrated, so the greens and the hotter colors are rated. So I actually don't have a lot of people in Florida. It looks like there's 1 in Palm Beach. There's 3 in Tampa. It's kind of scattered. Well, we have a limited budget. I'm going to call this visual discovery. We thought we wanted to do something in Florida for this class, but this class 20 years out, doesn't have a lot of people in Florida. There's a bunch in the Northeast, but we've already done stuff up there. The Bay Area, there's a big group out here. Let's switch our plans because we look at the data. We see something different than we thought. So I'm going to go up here and just grab the Bay Area with my mouse. So there's the Bay Area. Let's get rid of everybody else. That's a start. Let's go to the giving page, see what we got. Got 92 people, a couple 5-figure donors. Most haven't given much. In general, this is a spike in 08, 09. It's not been the best story with giving here. Let's go to the ratings page again. We're going to use this data the same way. Let's grab ambassadors. Let's grab the highly engaged and maybe the very engaged. We'll grab this group because we want to really reach out to this group. Here's 10 people who live in the Bay Area who are engaged or highly engaged. Let's use them as our starting point. Again, we could get rid of the unrateds, but I don't know. We're trying to build. We know these unrateds here are connected. We might want to use them to just help push this event. Going a little further, we could go back to sports and activities again, or maybe the degrees page. I mean, here's what degrees these 10 people have that we want to use as the anchor point for our now San Francisco event. Actually, what jumps is here's 2 rated prospects who have an MBA. Let's take a look at who they are. Looks like from the Wharton School in Pennsylvania, and then disguised XYZ College. One, the green, is a cum laude graduate. Engineering and economics. Who is this person? Harvey Thuler. What's his giving history been? Not so good. So maybe this is somebody we could use as an ambassador because he's got an MBA. He's probably connected, and has some organizational skills. We'd like to get him giving at a higher level because he's way under where he should be. And we've learned a little bit more about 2 of our 10. But again, I can go back to the first page. I want to work this 10. I can go over here, export it out of here, stick it on my desktop, and we now got that out of the web-based dashboard onto a desktop where somebody can then give it to the person making the calls to set this up, and just get at phone numbers or whatever, or whatever you want to do with it. You've now got it in that form. So what we just saw were 4 examples of using data you generally are going to have on hand to find top class agent candidates, how to assign prospects to them intelligently, how to reach a specific top prospect who might be the people who are most likely to know that person, can get you a conversation going. And we started with an event in Florida and switched it to California and found some ambassadors for it. So I think what we wanted to say here is, back to the beginning, relationship mapping is trying to find relationships like this that you can thoughtfully use to get your more engaged people connected with others and start building the pipeline and using it to cultivate and help grow the engagement or the attachment of your stakeholders. Where does the data come from? The last time we talked about outside data and event participation and creating these tracking invitations and a lot of other friends kinds of stuff. And this one we really looked at data that you're much more likely to have on hand, and we answered 4 questions with it, which is the kind of work we do all the time. So I would just, wandering around the industry and seeing a lot of this, there's a lot of buzz about getting board relationships and business relationships and all of that. We see people spending a bunch of money and time trying to do that, which is good. Those are valuable. But I would argue that in most cases, just like we did here, the internal data has a ton of rich information that you can use every day, and it updates all the time. It's in the database. All these scores we've been working with update every day. And you can have these kinds of dialogues, conversations, using the data to help really cull the pool and make the right assignments. And data tells stories, and this helps you understand what those stories are and make the right choices. So time for some questions here. If you have questions, there's 2 ways to ask your questions. One is there is an ability to put your hand up on the right panel of the go to trying to do things at once. You're on the GoToWebinar panel, and then we can unmute you and you can talk live. Or there's a chat and question at the bottom where if you type your question or come into the chat, we'll pick that up and get you an answer. There's a question that I'm going to paraphrase, kind of goes, we talked today about higher education. How does this apply to philanthropy where we don't have the same kind of data at all? Yeah, so in philanthropy, it's harder because you don't have these student activities and engagements. As people have not been involved with the organization in the same intense way. You know, in a church, they are. In a school, they are. But in a general philanthropy, you have to do a lot more to create engagement and attachment and relationship and have people disclose it, which is back to at the beginning we talked about the model of finding your most engaged people and using them as ambassadors to bring others in, and then really tracking that, because that becomes a relationship map and network that you can manage going forward. We've had some great success with that. We have in a regional metro area we've done this and it's worked well, and we've done it nationally and it's worked well. But higher education institutions are blessed with and really knowing their stakeholders for a long period of time, and people self-disclose, they fill out reunion surveys, and they're very open to this, and they generally want to be connected. It's a key part of their life, so it gets easier there. How do you track relationship mapping information? For example, if you give a volunteer solicitor a list of 200 people and ask them to let you know if you know anyone, and they identify 70 people, where's the information stored? Good question. So the data, hold on, I'm going to, while I'm talking, pull up a page from last time's presentation. But basically it needs to go in a table where the left column is the person who has the relationship, and then the next column are all of the relationships that that person has. So it's a bunch of rows in a table which can be stored in Excel or SQL Server or any database, or it can be many of the fundraising systems, Raiser's Edge, Advanced, Banner, have tables for this already, so it's just populating the existing table. And then tools like Advisor can bring that in and link it together with your other data. Here's from the last time. Yeah, so while I was talking, I found this and brought it up. This is a most systems have a relationships table. It can be called different things, but in most of the systems it's called relationships. And there's a constituent ID, which is 1298 is, say, if it's me. And then these relation IDs are the people I have the relationship with. 3192 is my cousin, this one's my cousin, this one's a friend, this one I introduced, this one I introduced, this one's a friend. And this will just keep growing over time. Like if I put on an event and I bring 30 people, you want to add 30 more rows for me. And then what software can do is bring this up and link it and put it in the form very much like we were doing today with student activities and sports, only it's relations. And the webinar from about a month ago, the prequel to this, showed how to use this kind of data. And what these descriptions are, it's whatever is relevant. These are disguised from one of our clients, but you clearly want to identify friends. Introduction, it could be a friend, but in this world, I think an introduction means they brought somebody to an event they hosted or was hosted, but they brought people. You don't actually know that they're a friend. This is like if they self-disclose it's a friend, it's this higher relationship of this. So there's some, if you do this, you want to have the relationship descriptions be meaningful so you know the stronger ones from the weaker ones. And we can help you with that. And again, this can literally be in an Access table, or it's a very simple table, Excel spreadsheet, although make it big, and it can be then linked in and joined to the core systems from Raiser's Edge or Banner or whatever. Other questions here. Who uses this? That's a good question. So typically, these, what I just did, where you're mining through the data like that to get these stories, is typically done by somebody in prospect research. It might be an admin assistant, a fundraiser, a frontline field officer is probably not going to do that, although there are cases where they do. But that kind of exploration and trying to vet whether we should take the science club or the fraternity, sorority, which has higher engagement, it requires an inquisitive mind and mind for data. So that's the person who would do that. But we try to structure. Let me go back to the project. We try to do. Actually, lost the. Hold on, I've got 2 PowerPoints open here. Let's go back to this one. Go back here and bring the demo back up. What we try to do, especially if this is going out to management or to field officers or to people who really aren't that familiar with data, we try to take the scores and make them really user-friendly, which is what we've done with these on this page, which we've jumped on and off a bunch of times. Underneath owner, there's all these factors over here. We've seen them a few times, these kinds of things. And these factors is a model with a complicated calculation that creates this score. And an analyst is fine, with the score and the factors. But if you put this out to a field officer or most management, they just don't have the time or necessarily the mind to deal with all these things. So we generally then roll them up into these categories: owner, highly engaged, engaged. So if you want to find, it's easy enough for somebody to say, I want to find the owners, here they are, who are highly rated, over here. So I've got 30 owners who are really highly rated, boom. Or I might want to go back, bring everybody back. I want to grab, who are the high rateds who are disconnected? I can see there's some color in here. I grab the high rateds, get rid of everybody else, the disconnected. So why are these 367 really highly rated people disconnected? And that gets my mind working. I might ask somebody to help me with it. So what I'm saying here is the way we generally work with data is try to get it in a form where it's consumable by the user, and it varies. So we can run from something that's pretty basic and simple, and you could put this inside of bars and lists, or it can be very detailed and can all go all the way down to the scores underneath these things and the ratings and the numbers and everything. So who uses this? Generally, what I've been doing to date with these demos today would be Prospect Research would be a prime user for that. Some of the field officers, but if you're at this level and you just took some of these pages off and simplified it, this is the kind of stuff we find the entire team can use. And we have clients that do push this out on browsers and iPads to even deans and provosts across the school, because they want some information on what's happening in their campaign, and they want to know, who are these people who are disconnected? All this really does matter, and that's the kind of questions they ask. It's just getting it in a format that's consumable. So long-winded way of saying this can be consumed by a wide range of stakeholders, from deans, provosts, VPs, down to data scientists, just getting the balance of what they're actually seeing. Right, and that's, I would urge you, any of you putting dashboards together, reporting tools, these discovery projects like this, no matter what you use, that's really critical to make sure you've got the right information in a consumable way for the person who's using it. And we like to use bars and things because we're visual, but this could equally well be in a list in more of a report format. Would be probably the show a little less, be a little less colorful. It might be more comfortable to some people. And if that's what it took, it's exactly how we would do it. Question, where does this all get the data from? Good question. So this one here I know is loading, it's disguised data from an Ellucian advanced system. So I think the client, I think we're loading like 30 of their advanced tables out of the Oracle database nightly, and we refresh nightly, so we're not touching the database during the day. But you can sort of see what we're loading just here. We load the student activities table, and then these metrics, we're just summing that to get how many each have been in. There's a student sports table. There's an alumni committees table. There's a giving table we use to calculate total giving from. There's degrees. You kind of saw that here. So those are the standard tables in advance that we're loading here. The prior one, where we focused more on philanthropic, was a Razor's Edge client. Conceptually, the tables are largely the same. They don't have degrees, obviously, but they have events, and the tables look basically the same. They may be stored differently, but when we implement one of these, we do the work and services to connect to the data and figure out the table links and whatnot. And we basically are going to load the data as it is. Sometimes there's, in the case of this one, there was a mart we could load like 15 tables from, and then I think we're loading a few out of the advanced source tables. We have another one we work with where there's no data mart. We're just loading 140, 150 tables out of the source system. We're just pulling them out of, I think it's Oracle every night. And we're flexible enough. We just pull the data, put it on a file somewhere, and then as I've been running it, I'm running in a browser, just loads the data into memory on a server. And then you have all this interaction capability, and this would upload, reload, be updated for tomorrow, and then not touch the database again. So the data, to summarize, is coming from generally the source systems, but we can also load, if everything's not in the source system, the question earlier about the relations, I said it could be in Access or Excel. Yeah, so we can load 20 advanced tables out of Oracle, pick up a couple tables out of Excel, grab some Access tables, and it all ends up in here. The user doesn't know where it came from. It's just tables of data that we've linked and put charts on, and then they're interactive. And probably from the system vendor's perspective, they're not going to like this, but there's a lot of data that's not in the source systems. We do a lot of work on major giving staff performance management, and there's tables to put the goals and objectives, but often the management team prefers just to put them in Excel because it's easier for them to manage the goals and objectives. So we have these like really nice systems, and then we're loading the goals and objectives out of an Excel spreadsheet and bringing it in, which is fine. So if you're in that mode, that's pretty normal. And you also get things like bulk screening will come in and it'll be in a Access table, and it won't be in the source system. May get there someday, it might not be there right away, or reunion surveys come in and they're over in SQL Server table or some file on somebody's desktop. As long as they can be accessed on a network, we can load them in and be good to go. There's some specific questions about us, so I'd like to I'll hit those at the end. I want to keep us up more at a tutorial level. What's the key value you've seen your clients get out of relationship mapping? That's kind of a loaded question. I think the key thing is what I just set up. It's getting these assignments set intelligently. And it's using people who know other people to get them into the fold, and it's understanding if somebody's not well attached, what kinds of activities would be most useful to build their attachment or their engagement score. Those are probably the three things. Finding the right ambassadors, figuring out how to lever them to get to other people, and then figuring out how best to cultivate people who aren't engaged or attached, so they are more engaged and attached, both with activities and also with people. And the data has a lot of stories to tell there, as we like to say, and if used the right way, it's pretty powerful. Well, questions can keep coming in. There's a couple of advisor-specific ones. One question is, are you a cloud offering, or you run on our own computers? And the answer is we can be either. I'm running here in a browser, which is running on where this runs from. Most of our clients, it's inside the firewall. They already have data. They already have systems. It's just a simple Microsoft web server. That thing could also be hosted in the cloud. We have a hosted offering, so we can sweep. It's one file of data, sweep it up every night, and then run the thing in our operation, and we manage it, and all the other stuff, security set up there. That sometimes the reason I would see for that is if the IT group on campus is too jammed up to take on another project, host it. And then when they free up, it's very easy to just move it back. It's just put a server in. It's the same file we load from every night would just be run locally instead of swept up to the cloud. Our offering and most of our power users run on Windows desktops, but everything I've done here is on a web version, which also this runs fine on tablets, iPad, for example. A number of our clients the ones I talked about where they push this out to deans and provosts, a lot of that's on iPads, where you can have this kind of a discussion. This page might be a little dense for an iPad. Might take a chart or two out, but you can have this kind of a discussion, standing in a conversation on a tablet. It's really powerful. All the interaction works, all finger gesturing, we have a native Apple iPad app that works really well. And again, where the server runs, it could be on inside your firewall on your premises, or it could be hosted. It doesn't really matter. It's the same software and the same capability. How many entities can your software handle? Well, this project has, it's a small one. Bring everybody back. Well, I've dropped, here's everybody back with no filters, 94,000 people. This is sort of a mid-sized school. This probably has 400,000 gift transactions. If I put the appeals data in for the annual fund, it might be a couple million appeals because there's a lot of them sent over a few years. We run with some of the larger state schools where there might be, I think, 1.5 million entities, 20 million gift transactions, 80 million, 90 million total rows, 50 tables, 500 fields. That kind of data size runs fine. I'm running on a sub-notebook Windows laptop here with 8 gig of RAM. I can run our biggest clients on it. I mean, they might take 6 gigs of, it might take most of my laptop if I'm running, 80 million rows, but it'll run fine. And on a server with a web version, the hardware is never an issue. The biggest advancement data sets can fit totally in one footprint, and you're going to have sub-second response time. And the thing we've seen, the load times, it loads in 10, 20, 30 seconds with that size data. Any cautions on use of relationship mapping? Yeah, the thing is, and as with all probabilistic things, like even if so the answer is yes, because you never quite know. You have somebody tagged as a friend. How do you really know how well they know each other? If it came from social media, it's probably pretty weak. If they're related in the same company, they might be in the same company, but they actually hate each other. You don't actually know that necessarily. Or maybe they were friends 3 years ago, but they haven't seen each other, so the friendship has sort of dwindled a little bit. So these are all indicators, and they're I think we use the words like the best potential campaign leads. It's the best potential ways to reach somebody. And these scores over here, I mean, you can't take any of these as hard and fast. I mean, obviously an owner, this person is the top of the list. 10 volunteers, this is crazy, 10 volunteers for all this stuff this person's done. We don't really know at this point in time how attached they are. I mean, it could have been that last year their son, after all of this, was denied admission and now have a really negative feeling, so they've become totally detached. So there's, even with this, where this looks so sure, this is a 2375, a clear owner because they've done all those things, something could have happened a little while back that isn't tracked in here that means no. So the caution is all of this is probabilistic. You are never 100% sure. Data tells stories, but the stories have nuances. So you just have to watch and interpret and be aware of that. And that's, I'm going to go off on a little bit of a tangent. With some of the outside consultants who will come in and do scores like this and once a year or whatever, if you get these scores once a year, things change. I mean, if somebody came to a reunion, the next day they should jump, not wait a year. If they had some experience that's a negative, that should be captured right away. And there's nuances in all of this that really play in. We had one example where we were trying to forecast using modeling propensity to give to financial aid causes. And there are all these factors, and it was a reunion survey where there was interest in philanthropy and scholarship or something like that, which came out really high with the people who had given the financial aid. And so that's a great factor. We can use that. And then somebody in the room said, absolutely not, because we know that those scores were adjusted. The survey was actually adjusted because we updated because we knew the people that had just given the financial aid had a high interest in it, so we upped the survey. So there was it was actually a redundant variable was not an independent variable at that point, so it actually needed to come out of the model. And that's the kind of thing where the team, people working together, collaborating, discussing, are going to be able to vet these issues and realize that, yeah, this isn't actually deterministic. It's not causal. This factor ought to come out. That's, to us, much more powerful than having some outside modeling expert come in periodically and create these things and then not be there when the discussion needs to happen. So the risk with all of this is that it's taking the data completely at face value versus it's directional, it's stories, it's indicative. And I'll go a little further. We do a lot of work on major giving staff performance management. There's some good webinars on that in our webinar library. And the thing we always say is the data, don't call it metrics, call it coaching tips and best practices, because it's going to highlight where something seems to be going better and something seems to not be going as well. But it's very useful to draw out the stories and get the people talking versus say this is bad because maybe this was low, but something else is really good, and they offset each other. So in our view, the data is just part of the story, and it's nuanced and needs to be vetted that way. And we are, as a group, our mission is to help enable teams to work with data and use it on their own without having to go outside for help or guidance. And this, what I just went through at the beginning, maybe a little bit overwhelming, but we've got lots of clients who pretty quickly pick it up. And what I just did is give you 100 examples of clients where they just do that all the time on their own, and it's natural to them. And it's actually it's quicker, it's more accurate, and it saves all the costs of going outside. Any other questions? A lot of good questions. So we'll leave it open for a little bit here, but I think we covered the topic. This has been recorded and will be posted in about a week. And if you have additional questions, just email us, and we'd be glad to get back to you. And we're also interested in feedback on these webinars. We're trying to keep them tutorial and educational, and we're open to your ideas for topics, other things you'd like to hear. This one did come about after the last one when a bunch of people came in and said, this is all great, but we're not tracking all the data you talked about. We said, fine, let's do another one that deals with the data you have on hand. Which is what today was about. So we're very open to that. And we have a lot of expertise, and obviously we're a for-profit business, but we're also trying to help this industry just learn and grow, and we want these to be tutorials as much as possible. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day.